There is a dream that haunts the corridors of human longing, a dream where you are chasing someone through endless hallways, reaching for them with outstretched hands, calling their name into the darkness. But no matter how fast you run, they remain perpetually ahead of you, just beyond the threshold of your grasp. And here is the paradox that makes this dream so intoxicating. The very fact that you cannot catch them is precisely what makes you need to. This is not just a dream. This is the architecture of desire itself. Tonight, we descend into one of the most profound mysteries of human psychology, a question that has destroyed kingdoms, inspired symphonies, and left millions of hearts suspended in the purgatory between hope and despair. Why do we become so magnetically attracted to people who cannot fully meet us? Why does emotional unavailability feel like love? Why does distance create desire? And why does absence make the heart grow not just fonder, but obsessed? The answer is not simple. It is not a matter of poor choices or bad luck. It is something far more ancient, far more intricate, and far more revealing about the hidden machinery of consciousness itself. You see, when you fall for someone who cannot love you back, you are not actually falling for them at all. You are falling into a portal, a doorway that leads directly to the oldest wounds in your psyche, to the unfinished symphonies of your childhood, to the parts of yourself you abandoned long ago in exchange for safety, for approval, for the illusion of control. Emotional unavailability is not a flaw in your taste. It is a language your unconscious mind speaks fluently, a language learned before you had words, encoded in the nervous system, written in the neural pathways of attachment and survival. And like all languages, it can be translated, it can be understood, and most importantly, it can be rewritten. But to rewrite it, we must first read what has been written. We must descend into the labyrinth of longing itself, through the corridors of neuroscience and childhood attachment, through the halls of evolutionary psychology and existential philosophy, through the chambers where desire and fear dance their eternal tango in the shadows of consciousness. Consider this: every person you have ever loved was chosen not by accident, not by randomness, not even by chemistry, but by the invisible hand of your unconscious mind, seeking to resolve something that was left unresolved, to heal something that was left wounded, to complete something that was left unfinished in the earliest chapters of your story. Carl Jung called this the compulsion to repeat. Freud termed it repetition compulsion. The Buddhists understood it as karma. Modern neuroscience reveals it as neural patterning and reward system conditioning. But beneath all these frameworks lies a single devastating truth. We do not seek love. We seek the familiar. And for many of us, the familiar does not feel like safety or warmth or presence. The familiar feels like longing, like waiting, like earning, like trying to make someone see us, choose us, stay. The familiar feels like emotional unavailability. And so we construct our entire romantic lives as elaborate rituals of reenactment, casting new actors in old roles, hoping that this time the story will end differently. This time, the unavailable person will become available. This time, the distant parent will turn around and see us. This time, the withheld love will be freely given. This time, we will finally be enough. But what if the point is not to change the ending? What if the point is to understand why we keep performing the same play? Tonight we are going to dismantle the machinery of unavailable attraction with surgical precision. We will trace its origins from the primordial attachment patterns of infancy through the neural highways of adolescent identity formation. We will explore how intermittent reinforcement creates addiction, how projection creates illusion, and how the pursuit of unavailable love is actually a sophisticated form of self-abandonment disguised as devotion. We will journey through the neuroscience of dopamine and desire, through the philosophy of existential longing, through the mythology of Orpheus descending into the underworld to retrieve his lost love, always looking back, always losing her again, always condemned to repeat the cycle of pursuit and loss. But more than understanding why this happens, we will discover what it means. Because attraction to emotional unavailability is not a pathology, it is a message. It is your psyche trying to tell you something crucial about what remains unhealed, unloved, and unintegrated within yourself. It is a map leading back to the parts of you that were exiled, abandoned, or rejected long before you ever met the emotionally unavailable person who now occupies the center of your consciousness. And here is the profound gift hidden within this painful pattern. The very intensity of your attraction to unavailable people is precisely equal to the intensity of your capacity for self-love, self-presence, and wholeness. Once you redirect that energy inward, once you stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of someone else's validation, once you realize that the love you are seeking has never been outside of you at all. This is not a lecture, this is not a diagnosis, this is an excavation, a careful, compassionate archaeological dig through the layers of your own becoming, seeking the moment when love became confused with longing, when presence became confused with pursuit, when wholeness became confused with incompleteness that only another person could fill. By the time we emerge from this journey, you will see your patterns with crystalline clarity. You will understand the hidden purposes they serve, and you will be standing at a threshold, the threshold between repetition and transformation, between unconscious reenactment and conscious choice, between seeking yourself in another and finding yourself within. The path ahead is not easy. It winds through shadow territories and forgotten landscapes. It asks you to look at truths you may have spent your whole life avoiding. But on the other side of this descent lies something more valuable than any unavailable person could ever offer: the awakening of your own presence, the reclamation of your own heart, the return to the one relationship that has been waiting for you all along, the relationship with yourself. So let us begin where all great journeys begin, not with answers, but with a question that unlocks everything else. What if the person you are chasing has always been you? The mirror is waiting. Let us see what it reveals. The first abandonment, attachment, and the architecture of love, before language, before memory, before the construction of identity and the emergence of self-awareness. There was only this: the experience of being held or not being held, the experience of crying and someone coming or no one coming, the experience of need and response or need and silence. This is where love is first defined, not as an idea, but as a felt sense, a visceral knowing written directly into the nervous system of the infant brain. And here is what neuroscience has discovered. The brain does not learn what love is, it learns what love feels like. And whatever it feels like in those first crucial years becomes the template, the blueprint, the unconscious definition that will shape every romantic attraction for the rest of your life. John Bowlby, the British psychologist who pioneered attachment theory in the 1950s, understood something revolutionary. We are born seeking connection not as a luxury, but as a biological imperative for survival. An infant cannot feed itself, protect itself, or regulate its own nervous system. It needs an external regulator, a caregiver whose presence provides not just food and shelter, but the very foundation of psychological safety, emotional regulation, and identity formation. But what happens when that caregiver is inconsistent? When their love is conditional, unpredictable, withdrawn as punishment, or offered only when the child performs correctly? What happens when the caregiver is physically present but emotionally absent, there in body but not in essence, visible but unreachable, proximate but fundamentally unavailable? The infant brain faces an impossible dilemma. It cannot survive without attachment. But the attachment figure is not reliably available, so it adapts, it learns. It creates survival strategies encoded so deeply into neural circuitry that they operate beneath conscious awareness for decades. Mary Ainsworth, working with Bowlby, identified these strategies through her famous strange situation experiments. She observed how infants responded when their mothers left the room and then returned. Some children, securely attached, showed distress at separation but were easily comforted upon reunion. They had learned that love was safe, that needs would be met, that presence was reliable. But others showed different patterns. Some became anxiously attached, hypervigilant, clingy, desperately seeking reassurance, yet never quite able to believe it when it came. These children had learned that love was inconsistent, that they had to work for it, amplify their needs, never relax into safety because safety could be withdrawn at any moment. And some became avoidantly attached, appearing indifferent to the mother's departure and return, having learned that emotional needs would not be met and therefore shutting down the need itself, developing precocious independence as armor against disappointment. But here is what Ainsworth could not observe in her laboratory: what happens inside the child's developing brain during these moments of separation and reunion, abandonment and return. Modern neuroscience, with its fMRI machines and its mapping of neural pathways, has filled in the missing pieces of this ancient story. When an infant experiences inconsistent caregiving, its developing brain attempts to make sense of a world that does not make sense. The amygdala, the alarm system of the brain, becomes hyperactive, constantly scanning for signs of danger, particularly social danger, particularly abandonment. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotional regulation, does not develop its full capacity for self-soothing because the child never fully learned that soothing was reliably available. Most crucially, the reward circuitry of the brain, the dopamine system that governs motivation, desire, and the experience of pleasure, becomes wired to find intermittent reinforcement intensely compelling. This is the key. This is where emotional unavailability becomes not just familiar, but intoxicating. Intermittent reinforcement, sometimes yes, sometimes no, never predictably either, is the most powerful conditioning mechanism known to psychology. It is more addictive than consistent reward. It is more compelling than reliable presence. Slot machines are designed on this principle. So are emotionally unavailable people. The child whose parent was sometimes warm and sometimes cold, sometimes present and sometimes absent, sometimes loving and sometimes critical, learns that love is something you chase, something you earn, something that requires constant vigilance and effort and strategic behavior. And the dopamine system, that ancient reward circuitry inherited from our evolutionary ancestors, becomes exquisitely sensitized to this pattern. When love is consistently available, dopamine levels remain steady. The reward has been obtained. The pursuit can rest. But when love is inconsistently available, dopamine spikes during moments of attainment and crashes during moments of withdrawal, creating a neurochemical roller coaster that the brain experiences as passion, as intensity, as true love. This is the devastating elegance of the trap. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between love and longing, between connection and pursuit, between actual intimacy and the adrenaline-soaked cycle of hope and disappointment that emotionally unavailable relationships provide. In fact, it may be hardwired to experience the latter as more real, more intense, more like what love is supposed to feel like. And so you grow up. You develop language, consciousness, ego structure, identity. You forget the infant who cried in the darkness. You forget the child who learned that love was something you had to earn. You forget the adolescent who concluded that the safest strategy was to desire people who could never fully desire you back, because if they cannot reach you, they cannot disappoint you. If they cannot have you, you cannot be abandoned. You forget all of this, but your nervous system remembers. Your amygdala remembers. Your dopamine circuits remember, and they continue to guide your attractions with invisible hands, selecting romantic partners the way a lock selects a key, not randomly, but with exquisite specificity, seeking the exact pattern that will replicate the original wound so it can finally be healed. The myth of Orpheus, descent into the underworld of love. The ancient Greeks understood something about longing that modern psychology is only now rediscovering. They told the story of Orpheus, the musician whose song could charm stones and tame wild beasts, whose lyre could make the very gods weep. Orpheus fell in love with Eurydice, and she with him. Their union was joy itself, presence meeting presence, heart answering heart. But on their wedding day, Eurydice was bitten by a serpent and died, descending to Hades, the underworld of the dead. Orpheus, consumed by grief, did what no mortal had ever done. He descended into the underworld to retrieve his lost love. His music moved even Hades, god of death, who agreed to release Eurydice on one condition. Orpheus must walk ahead of her, back to the world of the living, and he must not look back to see if she follows. He must trust without confirming. He must have faith without evidence. You know how the story ends. At the very threshold of the upper world, with sunlight just ahead, Orpheus looks back. He needs to see her, to confirm she is there, to make sure he is not being deceived. And in that moment of looking back, Eurydice vanishes forever, condemned to remain in the realm of shadows. This myth is not about the underworld. It is about unavailable love itself. Orpheus's love for Eurydice becomes most intense, not in their brief moment of union, but in her absence, in his descent, in his pursuit of someone who exists but cannot be touched, who is present but unreachable, who follows but can never be confirmed. The looking back, the need for reassurance, the inability to trust, the compulsion to check, is precisely what destroys the possibility of return. The emotionally unavailable person is always Eurydice, always just behind you, always almost there, always about to emerge from the shadows into full presence. But the moment you turn around to verify, to demand, to need confirmation of their love, they vanish, they pull back. They become even more unavailable than before, and you, like Orpheus, are left in the anguish of almost loved, almost chosen, almost enough. The pain of this almost is more intense than complete absence would be, because it contains both the promise of union and the certainty of loss. It is hope and despair in superposition, quantum states of love existing simultaneously, until the act of looking back collapses the waveform into loss. But here is the deeper truth the myth reveals. Orpheus makes a choice. He chooses to look back. He chooses certainty over trust, confirmation over faith, the need to see over the possibility of emergence. And in making this choice, he reveals something crucial about the nature of unavailable attraction. The emotionally unavailable person is not keeping you in pursuit. You are keeping yourself in pursuit. You are the one who looks back. You are the one who cannot tolerate uncertainty. You are the one who needs to verify, to chase, to prove, to convince, to earn. And in doing so, you ensure that the pattern repeats endlessly. Eurydice is not the problem. Orpheus is. Or more precisely, the compulsion to look back, the inability to trust, the need for external validation, the fear that without constant confirmation you will lose what you love. This is the true source of unavailable attraction. And where does this compulsion come from? From the original attachment wound, from the child who learned that love was unreliable, that presence could not be trusted, that you had to constantly monitor and verify and strategize to prevent abandonment. The myth teaches us that the descent into unavailable love is not actually about retrieving the lost beloved. It is about facing what lies in the underworld of your own psyche. The fear, the wound, the original abandonment that taught you love was something you could lose at any moment if you were not vigilant enough. The evolutionary echo. Why distance creates desire. But let us descend even deeper. Let us go back not just to childhood, not just to myth, but to the primordial origins of desire itself. to evolution, to survival, to the genetic imperatives that shaped human psychology millions of years before Bowlby identified attachment patterns or Freud named the unconscious. From an evolutionary perspective, the human mating system is built on a foundation of uncertainty. Unlike many species where reproduction is straightforward and commitment is clear, humans evolved in small tribal groups where paternity was uncertain, where resources were scarce, where forming bonds required navigating complex social dynamics. In this environment, individuals who were most attracted to available, reliable, committed partners would have had the most stable relationships and the most successful offspring. But here is the paradox. Individuals who were attracted to high status, somewhat unavailable partners might also have had evolutionary advantages, access to better genes, higher social standing, greater resources for offspring. This created what evolutionary psychologists call a mixed strategy, where the optimal reproductive strategy might involve both pair bonding with reliable partners and attempting to attract high-value partners who have many options and are therefore less consistently available. The problem is that these ancient strategies are still operating in modern brains, in modern relationships, in contexts completely different from the ones they evolved to navigate. The unavailable person triggers the pursuit response not because they are high-quality partners, but because their unavailability mimics the signals of high social value that our ancestors would have evolved to pursue. Distance creates desire because, in ancestral environments, something that was hard to get was usually valuable. Scarcity signaled worth. Easy availability suggested lower value. These heuristics made sense when evaluating food, territory, or genuine differences in mate quality. But in modern emotional unavailability, these ancient signals are being hijacked. The person is not actually more valuable, they are simply more distant. But your evolved psychology cannot tell the difference. It experiences the distance as value, the unavailability as desirability, the difficulty as evidence of worth pursuing. This is why emotionally unavailable people can seem more attractive than available ones. Not because they are objectively better partners, but because they trigger ancient valuation systems that confuse difficulty of access with quality of outcome. And there is something even more profound happening beneath this evolutionary echo. The human nervous system evolved to find the resolution of uncertainty intensely rewarding. When an ambiguous situation becomes clear, when a mystery is solved, when an uncertain outcome becomes certain, the brain releases powerful neurochemicals associated with learning, reward, and motivation. This is why gambling is addictive. This is why plot twists are satisfying. And this is why emotionally unavailable relationships can feel so compelling. They exist in a perpetual state of uncertainty that your brain is constantly trying to resolve. Will they text back? Will they commit? Will they finally see your worth? The uncertainty itself becomes the addiction, because your brain is hardwired to find the resolution of uncertainty more rewarding than certainty itself. An available partner offers no mystery to solve, no uncertainty to resolve, no question to answer. And so the ancient reward systems of your brain may register their reliability as boring, their consistency as uninteresting, their presence as lacking the neurochemical fireworks that come with the pursuit of someone who might or might not choose you. This is the tragedy. Your evolved psychology, designed for a world that no longer exists, is leading you away from actual love and toward the simulation of love, toward the pursuit, the longing, the aching uncertainty that your brain mistakes for passion. The dopamine trap, the neuroscience of intermittent reinforcement. Now we must descend deeper still into the actual machinery of the brain, into the neurochemical cascades that transform emotional unavailability from a pattern into an addiction, from a preference into a compulsion, from a choice into something that feels like fate. Imagine you are a rat in a laboratory. Before you is a lever. The first time you press it, you receive a food pellet. You press it again, another pellet. Every press delivers a reward. Within a short time, you learn the association. Lever equals food. You press it when you are hungry, and your hunger is satisfied. Simple, predictable, and crucially, not very interesting to your brain. Now imagine a different scenario. You press the lever and sometimes you receive a pellet, sometimes you receive nothing. Sometimes pressing it 5 times yields nothing, then the 6th press delivers 3 pellets. Sometimes it delivers immediately, sometimes after a delay, sometimes not at all. The pattern is random, unpredictable, intermittent. In this second scenario, something remarkable happens in your brain. You become obsessed with the lever. You press it compulsively, constantly, far more than you ever did when the reward was consistent. You develop behaviors around it, rituals, strategies, beliefs about what makes it work. You cannot stop thinking about it. Even when you are not hungry, you return to the lever, hoping this time will be the time. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it is the most powerful conditioning mechanism in all of behavioral psychology. It is more powerful than consistent reward. It is more powerful than punishment. It is the foundation of every addiction, every gambling compulsion, and every unavailable relationship you have ever been unable to leave. Here is why. When rewards are consistent, dopamine is released during the reward itself. The brain learns the pattern quickly, and after a while the dopamine release shifts to the cue that predicts the reward rather than the reward itself. You see the food, dopamine rises in anticipation. You eat the food, dopamine remains steady. The system has achieved equilibrium. But with intermittent reinforcement, the brain never achieves equilibrium. It never fully learns the pattern because there is no stable pattern to learn. Each time you press the lever, each time you text the unavailable person, each time you hope they will finally show up, each time you interpret their small gesture as evidence of change, your brain releases dopamine not because you received the reward, but because you might. The possibility itself becomes the drug. The uncertainty becomes the high. The gap between expectation and reality becomes a neurochemical slot machine with your own heart as the currency you keep gambling. And here is the devastating neuroscience. Intermittent reinforcement creates changes in the brain that consistent reward does not. It alters the density of dopamine receptors. It modifies the neural pathways in the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center. It creates a state of heightened anticipation that feels subjectively like passion, like deep connection, like true love, but is actually the neurochemical signature of addiction. When an emotionally unavailable person finally texts you back after days of silence, the dopamine spike in your brain is not measuring love. It is measuring the relief of uncertainty, the resolution of anticipation, the high that comes from winning the slot machine jackpot after countless losing spins. And because that spike is so intense, far more intense than the steady warmth of consistent affection, your brain learns to seek it. Your reward system becomes recalibrated to find intermittent attention more compelling than reliable presence, ambiguous interest more exciting than clear devotion, the maybe of unavailable love more stimulating than the yes of available love. This is why people often say that healthy relationships feel boring. They are not boring, but they do not activate the dopamine slot machine. They do not create the neurochemical roller coaster of hope and disappointment that your brain has learned to interpret as intensity, as passion, as evidence that this must be real love because it hurts so much. The cruel irony is that your suffering becomes the proof. If it were easy, if it did not hurt, if you were not constantly anxious and uncertain and reaching for someone just beyond your grasp, your conditioned brain would not recognize it as love. Real love, in this distorted neurochemistry, must involve suffering, must involve pursuit, must involve the ache of almost. This is the dopamine trap. And once you are in it, the trap tightens with each cycle. Every time you are rejected and then breadcrumbed back, every time you almost leave but then receive just enough attention to stay, every time you convince yourself this time will be different, you are not moving toward resolution. You are training your brain that this pattern is what love looks like, what love feels like, what love must be. The shadow self, Jung and the projection of unloved parts. But neurochemistry is only half the story. Beneath the dopamine, beneath the conditioning, there is something even more profound happening, something Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to illuminate, something he called the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is not darkness in a moral sense. The shadow is simply the parts of yourself that you learn to reject, repress, or deny in order to be acceptable, to be loved, to survive in your family system and society. It is the exiled territories of your psyche, the emotions you are not allowed to feel, the needs you are not allowed to have, the qualities you are not allowed to express. For some people, the shadow contains their anger, their aggression, their power, qualities deemed unacceptable in childhood and therefore pushed into the unconscious. For others, the shadow contains their vulnerability, their neediness, their desire for connection, qualities that were shamed or punished and therefore hidden away. But here is Jung's crucial insight. Whatever you repress does not disappear. It goes underground. It enters the unconscious. And from there, it exerts a magnetic pull on your perceptions, your relationships, your attractions. You do not see the world as it is. You see it through the lens of your shadow, constantly searching for the parts of yourself you abandoned, projected onto others, seeking reunion with the wholeness you fractured long ago. When you are intensely attracted to an emotionally unavailable person, Jung would say you are not actually attracted to them. You are attracted to what they represent. Some disowned part of yourself, some quality you rejected, some need you buried, some wholeness you lost. If you learned as a child that your emotional needs were too much, that asking for love was shameful, that needing connection made you weak, you likely developed a persona of independence, of not needing anyone, of being fine alone. Your need for connection became shadow material, pushed into the unconscious, denied existence. And then you meet someone emotionally unavailable, someone who represents the very distance and independence you have built your entire identity around, someone who will never ask too much of you emotionally, because they cannot even meet your needs, let alone burden you with theirs. And you are fascinated, captivated, obsessed. Why? Because they are carrying your shadow. They are expressing the very quality, emotional distance that you have disowned in yourself, but secretly identify with. In pursuing them, you are pursuing the part of yourself you rejected. You are trying to love and accept in them what you could not love and accept in yourself. Or consider the opposite. If you learned that your independence was threatening, that your autonomy made you unlovable, that you had to be compliant and agreeable to receive affection, you likely disowned your capacity for boundaries, for self-assertion, for saying no. These qualities became shadow material, and then you are attracted to someone unavailable, someone who has clear boundaries, who can say no, who protects their autonomy, who will not be consumed or controlled. Again, you are not attracted to them despite these qualities. You are attracted to them because of these qualities, because they represent what you rejected in yourself, what you were not allowed to be, what you secretly long to reclaim. This is projection in its purest form. You are not seeing the other person clearly. You are seeing your own disowned qualities reflected back at you, and the intensity of your attraction is proportional to the intensity of your self-rejection. Jung believed that the path to wholeness required withdrawing your projections, reclaiming your shadow, integrating the exiled parts of yourself back into conscious awareness. But this is terrifying work, because it means acknowledging that you are not who you thought you were, that the persona you built for safety and acceptance is only a fragment of your actual being, that you contain qualities you have spent your entire life denying. It is easier to keep the projection active. It is easier to chase the unavailable person, to believe that union with them will make you whole, to avoid the confrontation with your own fractured psyche by focusing all your energy on someone else's inability to meet you. But projection is a prison. As long as you are seeing your shadow in someone else, you cannot reclaim it. As long as you are pursuing wholeness outside yourself, you cannot discover that it was always within. As long as the emotionally unavailable person holds the key to your completion, you remain locked in the cycle of pursuit and disappointment, hope and despair, seeking and never finding. The emotionally unavailable person is a mirror, but it is not reflecting their unavailability. It is reflecting yours, your unavailability to yourself, your disconnection from your own needs, your abandonment of your own heart in pursuit of someone else's validation. The fantasy bond, trading, real love for imagined love. Now we arrive at one of the most painful truths about unavailable attraction. It is not actually about the other person at all. It is about the story you tell yourself about them, about the relationship, about what could be if only they would change, if only they would see your worth, if only you could love them enough to heal them. Robert Firestone, a psychologist who studied relationship dynamics for over 40 years, identified what he called the fantasy bond, a defense mechanism where people substitute an imagined connection for a real one, where the idea of the relationship becomes more important than the actual experience of it. In a fantasy bond, you are not in love with the person. You are in love with your fantasy of who they could be, with the potential you see in them, with the relationship you believe is possible beneath all the disappointment and distance and pain. You stay not because of who they are, but because of who you imagine they might become. This allows you to avoid the vulnerability of actual intimacy. Real intimacy requires showing up as you are, being seen in your messiness and imperfection, risking rejection from someone who actually knows you. But in a fantasy bond, you never have to risk that. The emotionally unavailable person never knows the real you, never gets close enough to see your flaws, never stays long enough to be disappointed. In the fantasy, you are perfect. In the fantasy, the love is transcendent. In the fantasy, if you could just break through their walls, everything would be beautiful. And as long as you stay in the fantasy, you never have to confront the reality, which is that you are avoiding real intimacy just as much as they are. Firestone observed that people often prefer fantasy bonds to real relationships because fantasy bonds offer control. You can shape the narrative, you can edit the story, you can focus on the moments of connection and dismiss the months of distance. You can interpret their mixed signals as deep feeling, their occasional attention as proof of love, their inability to commit as evidence of a wound you alone can heal. But real relationships do not offer this kind of control. Real people are autonomous, unpredictable, capable of disappointing you, not because they are damaged, but because they are human. Real love requires accepting someone as they actually are, not as you hope they will become. And real intimacy requires being accepted as you actually are, which is far more terrifying than being idealized by someone who barely knows you. The fantasy bond protects you from this terror. As long as you are focused on changing them, fixing them, waiting for them to become available, you do not have to face your own fear of actually being seen, known, and possibly found insufficient. And here is the deep paradox. The very intensity of your longing for the unavailable person is often a measure of how unavailable you are to yourself, how defended you are against real intimacy, how much you prefer the safety of unrequited love to the risk of mutual, present, equal connection. The illusion of control, anxious attachment, and the pursuit of certainty. There is another dimension to this labyrinth, another layer of the trap. For many people drawn to emotional unavailability, the pursuit itself creates an illusion of control in a world that feels fundamentally unsafe. If you grew up with anxious attachment, never quite certain if your caregiver would be responsive, always scanning for signs of approval or rejection, developing a hypervigilant nervous system, constantly monitoring for threats to connection, then uncertainty became your baseline state. Love was never predictable, safety was never guaranteed. You learned that you had to work for connection, that you could not relax into trust, that abandonment could come at any moment. In this internal landscape, choosing an emotionally unavailable person makes a certain twisted sense. If love is going to be uncertain anyway, if abandonment is inevitable, if you are always going to be anxious about connection, then at least you can choose when and how that anxiety manifests. At least you can focus it on someone specific, explain it through their unavailability, make it about their issues rather than your own fundamental unworthiness. The unavailable person gives you something to blame for your anxiety. They give you a tangible reason for your distress, and paradoxically, this creates a sense of control. If the problem is their unavailability, then there is potentially a solution. Get them to become available, change them, love them enough, prove your worth, solve the puzzle. But if the problem is your own nervous system, your own attachment wounding, your own internalized belief that you are not worthy of consistent love, there is no simple solution. There is only the long, difficult work of healing, of therapy, of building secure attachment from the inside out. And that feels overwhelming, impossible, too much to face. So you focus on them, you make them the project. You pour all your energy into understanding their psychology, their trauma, their reasons for being unavailable. You become an expert on avoidant attachment, on commitment issues, on emotional walls. You strategize and analyze and interpret every small action for signs of progress or retreat. And in doing all of this, you are doing something profoundly self-protective. You are avoiding looking at yourself. You are avoiding the deeper question, why do I keep choosing this? What part of me finds this familiar? What am I avoiding by staying in this pattern? The anxiously attached person pursuing the avoidantly attached person is not seeking love. They are seeking the familiar experience of seeking love, the pursuit itself, the anxiety itself, the aching uncertainty that their nervous system interprets as normal, as what relationships are supposed to feel like. And there is a terrible comfort in this. The known pain is always easier to tolerate than the unknown possibility of healing. The familiar suffering is always less terrifying than the unfamiliar experience of secure love. Better the devil you know, even if that devil is your own compulsive pursuit of unavailable people, than the angel you don't, which is the possibility of being truly met, truly seen, truly chosen by someone who stays. The trauma bond, when pain becomes connection. Now we must speak of the darkest territory in this labyrinth, the place where unavailable love crosses the threshold from painful pattern into trauma bond, where the cycle of hope and disappointment becomes so intense that it mimics the psychological effects of captivity, hostage situations, and abusive relationships. Patrick Carnes, who studied trauma bonding extensively, identified a phenomenon where intermittent abuse and kindness, pain and relief, abandonment and rescue create a bond stronger than consistent love ever could. This is the psychology behind Stockholm Syndrome. This is why hostages sometimes develop positive feelings toward their captors. And this is why some emotionally unavailable relationships take on a quality beyond mere pattern. They become a form of psychological captivity. In a trauma bond, the nervous system becomes addicted not just to the intermittent reinforcement of attention, but to the cycle of stress and relief itself. When the unavailable person withholds, your nervous system goes into a state of alarm. Cortisol floods your system, your heart rate increases, your mind obsesses and catastrophizes. When they return, even minimally, your nervous system floods with relief. Endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine all surge at once. This neurochemical cocktail is incredibly powerful. It is the same hormonal cascade that occurs during trauma survival and subsequent rescue. Your body is experiencing the unavailable person's occasional attention as if they are saving you from danger, when in reality, they are the source of the danger, the cause of the alarm in the first place. But your brain does not make this distinction. It only knows the relief, and that relief becomes addictive, becomes proof of love, becomes the reason you cannot leave, even when every rational part of you knows you should. Trauma bonds also involve a phenomenon called cognitive dissonance, the psychological distress that comes from holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. On one hand, you know this person is hurting you, is unavailable, is not treating you well. On the other hand, you love them. You have invested so much. You believe in the relationship. To resolve this cognitive dissonance, your mind does something remarkable. It changes your perception of reality. It minimizes the bad behavior. It exaggerates the good moments. It creates narratives that explain away the unavailability. They are just scared. They have been hurt before. They need time. They are showing love in their own way. You are too demanding. You are too sensitive. If you were just better at understanding them, everything would be fine. This is not stupidity. This is not weakness. This is the mind trying to protect itself from the unbearable reality that you have given your heart to someone who cannot or will not reciprocate, and that leaving would mean acknowledging all the time and emotion and hope you have invested was for nothing. So you stay. And the longer you stay, the more evidence your mind needs to collect to justify the staying. And the pattern deepens, the bond tightens, until one day you realize that you are more attached to the pain than you are to the person, more identified with the suffering than with your own dignity, more committed to proving you can make this work than to admitting it never could. This is the heart of the labyrinth. This is the minotaur at the center, not the unavailable person, but your own attachment to unavailability itself, your own investment in the pattern, your own terror of what it would mean to walk away and face the emptiness, the grief, the truth that this is not love and perhaps never was. The moment of seeing, when the pattern breaks. There comes a moment in every descent when you must choose, continue deeper into the labyrinth or turn back toward light. There comes a moment when the pattern that has governed your entire romantic life suddenly becomes visible, not as isolated incidents, but as a coherent whole, a map you have been following without knowing you were following it, a story you have been telling without recognizing it was a story at all. This moment is not intellectual, it is visceral. It is the moment when you are texting the unavailable person yet again, crafting the message carefully, trying to strike the balance between interest and independence, between reaching out and not seeming desperate. And suddenly, you see yourself from the outside. You see what you are doing. You see that you have done this 100 times before, with this person and with others before them. And it has never worked, and it will never work, because the problem is not the message or the timing or your strategy. The problem is that you are texting someone who does not want to be reached, and you are doing it because some part of you does not want to be reached either. Some part of you is more comfortable in pursuit than in presence, more at home in longing than in having, more alive in the ache of almost than in the fullness of actually. This is the moment of seeing, and it is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because you must acknowledge your own complicity, your own unconscious choice, your own attachment to suffering. You are not just a victim of their unavailability. You are an architect of the dynamic, a co-creator of the dance, someone who has been choosing this pattern over and over because it served some hidden purpose you have not been willing to examine. But liberating, because once you see the pattern, You are no longer entirely trapped by it. Consciousness is the beginning of freedom. Awareness is the first step toward change. You cannot transform what you cannot see, and now you see it, clear as the threads of Theseus guiding him back through the maze. You see that every unavailable person you have ever loved was a mirror reflecting the same wound, asking the same question. When will you stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of someone else? When will you turn the immense energy and devotion you pour into unavailable people toward the one person who has been waiting for it all along, yourself? The revelation: you are the unavailable one. And here is the revelation that changes everything, the insight that dissolves the entire architecture of unavailable attraction. You are not attracted to emotionally unavailable people despite their unavailability. You are attracted to them because of your unavailability. Your unavailability to yourself, your disconnection from your own heart, your abandonment of your own needs in favor of seeking external validation. Every moment you spend obsessing over what they are thinking, whether they will text back, why they are distant, is a moment you are not present to yourself. Every ounce of energy you pour into understanding their psychology, healing their wounds, waiting for them to change, is energy you are not directing toward your own healing, your own wholeness, your own becoming. The emotionally unavailable person is not keeping you from love. They are showing you that you have already kept yourself from love, that you have already chosen distance over presence, that you have already learned to find intensity in longing rather than in fullness, that you have already decided some part of you is unworthy of being seen, known, and chosen. This is not blame, this is not shame, this is simply truth. And the truth is that you learned this. You learned to abandon yourself the same way someone once abandoned you. You learned to withhold from yourself the same way love was once withheld from you. You learned that your needs were too much, your emotions were too big, your true self was unacceptable. And so you created a persona of acceptability, and you locked your authentic self away in the same prison you now try to rescue your unavailable beloved from. But you are the one holding the key. You have always been holding the key. Every time you choose an unavailable person, you are choosing to stay unavailable yourself. You are choosing to remain hidden, protected, defended against the vulnerability of real intimacy. You are choosing the familiar pain of unrequited love over the unfamiliar possibility of mutual, present, committed connection. And you are doing this because being unavailable feels like power. It feels like control. It feels like you cannot be hurt if you do not fully arrive, cannot be rejected if you never fully offer yourself, cannot be abandoned if you are always the one pursuing rather than the one staying. But this is an illusion. You are already hurt. You are hurting yourself every day, every moment you invest in someone who does not invest back. You are already rejected, not by them, but by yourself, by your own refusal to honor your needs, your own refusal to walk away from what does not serve you, your own refusal to believe you are worthy of better. And you are already abandoned by yourself, by the part of you that looks at your suffering and says, "Stay anyway. Chase anyway. This is all you deserve." The truth is that you are not seeking love from unavailable people. You are hiding from love behind unavailable people. You are using their unavailability as a shield against your own terror of being fully seen, fully known, fully chosen by someone who stays. Because if someone truly available showed up, someone truly present, someone who truly saw you and chose you and stayed, you would have to let them in. You would have to be vulnerable. You would have to drop the persona of perfection or independence or being fine alone. You would have to show them the messy, needy, uncertain parts of yourself. You would have to risk being found insufficient, not based on unavailability or bad timing or circumstance, but based on who you actually are. And that is the most terrifying risk of all: the return, becoming available to yourself. So we arrive at the threshold of transformation. We stand at the edge where understanding must become action, where insight must become practice, where the revelation of your own unavailability must translate into the long, patient, daily work of returning to yourself. This is not a single moment. This is not one decision. This is a practice, 1,000 small choices every day to stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of someone else, to redirect the energy you have been pouring outward back toward your own healing and wholeness. It begins with a simple but radical act. You stop chasing. You do not make a dramatic exit. You do not send the closure text or demand the explanation or wait for them to validate your decision to leave. You simply stop. You stop reaching out. You stop checking their social media. You stop crafting imaginary conversations in your mind. You stop interpreting their silence as meaningful. You stop making their life your obsession. And in the space that opens up when you stop chasing, something remarkable happens. You notice how much of your life has been colonized by the pursuit, how many hours you have spent thinking about them instead of creating something meaningful, how much energy you have burned analyzing their behavior instead of understanding your own, how much of your identity has become organized around being the person who loves too much, who waits too long, who gives too freely to those who cannot receive. In this space you begin to grieve, not just for them, not just for the relationship that never was, but for yourself, for the years you spent believing you were not enough, for the opportunities you missed because you were too focused on unavailable people, for the parts of yourself you abandoned in the hope that someone else would validate you. This grief is holy. It is not weakness. It is the natural response of a psyche recognizing what was lost, what was sacrificed, what was given away in exchange for the illusion of love. And beneath the grief, if you can stay with it, if you can breathe through it, if you can let it move through you without trying to fix it or bypass it, or fill the emptiness with another unavailable person, beneath the grief, you will find something else, something that has been waiting for you all along. You will find yourself, not the self you constructed for approval, not the self that learned to chase and earn and prove, but the original self, the one who existed before the wound, before the abandonment, before you learned that love was something you had to pursue rather than something you could receive. This self knows its own worth. This self does not need to chase because it is already whole. This self does not need to convince or prove or wait because it trusts that the right love will arrive without force, without strategy, without the exhausting hypervigilance of anxious attachment. This self can look at someone emotionally unavailable and feel not attraction, but clarity. This person is not available for the kind of relationship I want. I release them with compassion, and I release myself from the pattern of pursuit. This is not easy. Your nervous system will resist. Your dopamine pathways will scream for the familiar intensity of unavailable love. Your attachment system will tell you that being alone is dangerous, that you need to secure connection even if that connection is toxic, that anything is better than the emptiness of no relationship at all. But this is where the real work happens. This is where you learn to regulate your own nervous system instead of using another person to regulate it for you. This is where you learn to sit with anxiety without texting them. This is where you learn to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, not chasing, not trying to control the outcome. This is where you learn that you can be your own secure base, your own source of validation, your own evidence that you are worthy of love, not because you earn it, not because you prove it, but because you exist. And slowly, practice by practice, day by day, something shifts. The unavailable person becomes less magnetic. Their silence becomes less significant. Their mixed signals become less compelling. You stop interpreting their behavior as meaningful because you realize it was never about you in the first place. It was always about them, their wounds, their limitations, their own unavailability to themselves. And as they recede in importance, you emerge into focus. Your own life becomes more vivid. Your own needs become more legitimate. Your own desires become more trustworthy. You stop asking, why don't they want me? And start asking, what do I want? What do I need? What kind of love am I truly seeking? And the answer might surprise you. Because underneath all the unavailable attractions, underneath all the pursuit and longing and heartbreak, there was always a desire for something else, for presence, for mutuality, for being seen and choosing to stay, for the kind of love that does not require strategy or performance or constant vigilance, for the kind of love that is simply two people showing up as they are, meeting each other in presence, choosing each other without ambiguity, staying without being chased. That love was always what you wanted, but you had to learn you were worthy of it first. You had to learn to give it to yourself before you could recognize it in another. You had to become available before available love could find you. The integration, shadow, light, and wholeness. And here is where Jung's wisdom becomes practice. The work is not just to stop chasing unavailable people. The work is to reclaim the shadow parts of yourself that you have been projecting onto them, to integrate the qualities you disowned, to become whole rather than remaining fractured. If you have been attracted to distant people because you disowned your own need for connection, the work is to let yourself need, to let yourself want, to let yourself ask for what you desire without shame, without apology, without the belief that your needs are too much. If you have been attracted to boundaried people because you disowned your own capacity for no, the work is to reclaim your boundaries, to let yourself say no without guilt, to let yourself protect your energy without fear of being seen as selfish. If you have been attracted to unavailable people because you disowned your own vulnerability, the work is to let yourself be seen in your imperfection, to risk showing up as you are, messy and uncertain and afraid, and trusting that the right person will not run from your humanity. This is integration. This is becoming whole, not by finding someone else to complete you, but by reclaiming the parts of yourself you exiled in order to be loved, in order to be safe, in order to survive. And as you integrate these shadow aspects, as you reclaim these disowned parts, something miraculous happens. Unavailable people stop being attractive, not because you have changed your taste, but because you have changed your internal landscape. The quality they represented is no longer projected outward onto them. It is integrated inward into you. You no longer need to love someone distant to access your own independence. You are independent. You no longer need to pursue someone boundaried to access your own strength. You are strong. You no longer need to fix someone wounded to feel needed. You need yourself, and that is enough. This does not mean you become isolated or self-sufficient to the point of not needing connection. Humans are wired for connection. We need each other. But there is a difference between needing connection and needing it from someone who cannot provide it. There is a difference between desiring partnership and desiring the specific person who represents your own disowned qualities. Integration means you show up to relationships as a whole person seeking to connect with another whole person, not as a fractured person seeking your missing pieces in someone else's refusal to meet you. The new attraction, from intensity to presence. And then, when you have done this work, when you have returned to yourself and integrated your shadow and learned to be available to your own heart, something shifts in what attracts you. The intensity that once signaled love no longer does. The anxiety that once felt like passion is revealed as alarm. The obsessive thinking that once seemed like deep connection is recognized as rumination born of insecurity. And in place of intensity, you begin to feel attracted to presence, to consistency, to reliability, to people who show up, who mean what they say, who follow through, who do not need to be chased because they are already there, already choosing you, already clear. At first, this might feel boring. Your dopamine-conditioned brain might not light up the way it used to. The secure person might not create the neurochemical fireworks of the unavailable one. But if you can stay, if you can allow yourself to be met rather than to chase, if you can tolerate the unfamiliar experience of someone actually being available, you will discover something your nervous system has been searching for all along: safety. The deep, somatic experience of safety that comes from being with someone who is not going to abandon you, who is not going to play games, who is not going to make you earn their affection through hypervigilance and strategy. And in that safety, a different kind of love becomes possible. Not the dramatic highs and lows of unavailable attraction, not the intensity of intermittent reinforcement, but the steady, deepening intimacy that comes from two people actually showing up, actually being present, actually letting themselves be known. This love might not feel like the love stories you have internalized. It might not feel like the songs or the movies or the cultural narratives that equate love with suffering, with longing, with the ache of unrequited passion. But it is real. It is sustainable. It is the love that heals rather than wounds, that builds rather than depletes, that adds to your life rather than consuming it. And slowly, your nervous system learns a new pattern. It learns that presence can be trusted, that consistency is not boring but beautiful, that being chosen clearly is more valuable than being desired ambiguously, that the right person will not require you to abandon yourself in order to be with them. Your reward system recalibrates. Dopamine stops spiking for breadcrumbs and starts responding to genuine connection. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, increases in relationships characterized by trust and presence. Your amygdala calms, no longer constantly scanning for signs of abandonment. You have rewired not just your behavior, but your neurobiology. You have taught your brain a new definition of love, and in doing so, you have freed yourself from the compulsion to repeat, from the cycle of seeking unavailable people, from the pattern that has governed your romantic life. This is not just changing who you date, this is transforming who you are. So we return to where we began, to the dream of chasing someone through endless hallways, to the myth of Orpheus looking back, to the question that unlocked everything. What if the person you are chasing has always been you? You now know the answer. You have descended through the labyrinth of neurochemistry and attachment theory, through the corridors of shadow projection and trauma bonding, through the deep archaeology of your own becoming. And you have discovered that attraction to emotionally unavailable people was never about them. It was always a message from your unconscious, a map leading back to your own abandonment of self, your own internalized unavailability, your own fear of being fully seen and still chosen. This knowledge changes everything and nothing. The pattern does not disappear simply because you understand it. The wounds do not heal simply because you name them. The neural pathways do not rewire simply because you recognize their existence. But understanding is the beginning. Seeing the pattern is the crack in the prison wall. Recognizing your own complicity is the moment the cage door unlocks. What you do with this knowledge determines whether this was simply information or transformation. Will you continue the pattern now that you see it? Will you choose another unavailable person, armed with new insights to explain why this time is different? Or will you do the harder thing, the truly revolutionary act of stopping the chase, returning to yourself, learning to become available to your own heart first? The world does not prepare you for this work. The culture you live in celebrates romantic pursuit, glorifies suffering for love, makes heroes of those who chase the unavailable beloved across continents and lifetimes. Every love song is about longing. Every movie is about winning over the reluctant heart. The narrative you have internalized since childhood says that real love requires pursuit, that difficulty equals worth, that if you just try hard enough, the unavailable person will finally see you. But you know differently now. You know that this is not love. It is repetition. It is the unconscious trying to resolve an old wound by recreating it in new relationships, hoping that this time the ending will be different. It will not be different until you are different, until you stop looking for yourself in other people's mirrors and learn to recognize your own reflection, until you stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of external validation and learn to validate yourself from within, until you stop choosing people who cannot meet you and learn to meet yourself first. This is the work of consciousness. This is the evolution that technology and philosophy and psychology are all pointing toward, the shift from unconscious repetition to conscious choice, from projection to integration, from seeking yourself in others to finding yourself within. We stand at a unique moment in human history. For the first time, we have tools to map the brain, to understand attachment, to illuminate the unconscious processes that previous generations could only intuit. We have frameworks from Jung and Freud and Bowlby and neuroscience to understand why we do what we do. We have the capacity to see our patterns with unprecedented clarity. And with that seeing comes responsibility. Once you know, you cannot unknow. Once you see the pattern, choosing it again becomes a conscious choice rather than an unconscious compulsion. And that changes the moral dimension of the situation. You are no longer simply a victim of your wounding. You are someone with agency, with choice, with the capacity to do differently. This is both burden and gift. Burden because it is easier to blame unavailable people than to take responsibility for your own healing. Gift because it means you are no longer trapped, no longer at the mercy of unconscious patterns, no longer condemned to repeat the past. The future of relationships, the future of love itself, depends on people doing this work, on individuals choosing to become conscious, to heal their wounds, to stop projecting their shadow, to reclaim their wholeness. Because as long as we remain unconscious, we will continue to create relationships that are simply reenactments of childhood trauma, playgrounds for our projections, arenas for our compulsive repetitions. But when we become conscious, when we do the work of integration and healing, we create the possibility of new kinds of relationships. Relationships based on presence rather than pursuit, on mutuality rather than projection, on two whole people choosing each other rather than two wounded people seeking completion through each other. This is the evolution of consciousness itself, from unconscious to conscious, from pattern to choice, from seeking yourself in others to finding yourself within, and then, from that place of wholeness, choosing to share yourself with another whole human being. So I leave you with this. The next time you feel that familiar pull towards someone unavailable, that magnetic attraction to distance and ambiguity and the ache of almost, pause. Do not act. Do not text. Do not chase. Instead, ask yourself, what part of me am I seeing in them? What disowned quality are they representing? What wound am I trying to heal through them? What am I avoiding in myself by focusing on their unavailability? And then, do the harder thing. Turn toward yourself. Give yourself the attention you are about to pour into them. Show yourself the devotion you are preparing to offer someone who cannot receive it. Love yourself with the intensity you are about to direct at someone else's distance. This is not selfishness. This is not giving up on love. This is the only path to real love. The path that leads through yourself, through your own healing and wholeness, through becoming the available, present, conscious person you seek in another. And when you have walked that path, When you have done that work, when you have learned to be available to yourself, then love will find you differently, not as a chase, not as intensity, not as the familiar ache of unavailability, but as presence, as choice, as the quiet, steady knowing that you are with someone who sees you, chooses you, and stays, not because you chased them, not because you earned it, not because you convinced them, but because two available hearts recognized each other and said yes. That is the love worth waiting for. That is the love you have always deserved. That is the love that becomes possible when you stop chasing ghosts and start inhabiting your own life. The mirror reflects only truth, and the truth is this: you were never chasing them. You were always running from yourself. Now stop running, turn around, come home. The one you have been searching for has been searching for you too, from within. It is time to let yourself be found. If this journey resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these patterns, if you felt the truth of these words in your body, you are not alone. This is the work of becoming conscious, of evolving beyond repetition, of choosing yourself first so you can truly choose another. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to continue this exploration of consciousness, psychology, and the hidden mechanisms of the mind, and most importantly, do the work. Your future self, your whole, available, present self, is waiting.